A church is a community and a culture and more. It is not an institution nor an element of civilization nor a product of a culture. The church is the alternative to everything that exists and has existed during the last 6,000 years. As a matter of convenience, the system the world adopted is referred to as liberalism. Biblically, the liberal worldview is associated with Babylon. To make the situation crystal clear, liberalism is a very flexible system. It has undergone a multitude of complex metamorphoses. Democracy, tyranny, capitalism, communism and fascism are all part of the liberal system. The Christian and Catholic churches are inherently liberal, as are all the cults and all those things that oppose them. There is no attempt to minimize the differences that exist between us and our social systems. In fact, to be totally clear about the expansiveness of what liberalism encompasses, we can say that every human social innovation is part of this same class liberal worldview that has existed since the days of Eden, and this has been true for the intervening 6,000 years. Ever since mankind was ejected from Eden, we have resided in one form of the liberal system or another. No tribe, city, nation or institution has managed to withdraw from Babylon nor develop an alternative paradigm. The closest we have come to perfection is the Christian church, but even this is a deformed. The human beings it creates are still heavily invested in the liberal system and the concerns of the flesh. To be clear then, for the entire period of time since Eden, despite the many large and small changes in how we live, there is one thing that has remained constant in every hamlet and empire: we have remained heavily invested in the parasitic structures developed by liberals. What is true culturally and systemically is not necessarily true for individuals. Many have risen above the values of the cultures they live in. What has changed, over time, is not the life of the saint. The way of the saved remained largely unchanged. But parasites have modified the way they legitimize their free-riding activities over the last 6,000 years. The way of the capitalist parasite is different from the way of the socialist parasite, which differs again from the parasites of fascism. But they are all parasites. This is not the place to go into all of the many variations in the constant that unites parasites together under one racial type. However, it is important we look at freeloading and understand what it is. To do this, we must understand liberalism. To understand a liberal, we only need to realize liberalism is all about making excuses for free riding. If you hear anyone rationalizing why he or she is entitled to something or has a right to something, you know you are being confronted by a liberal. To make it clear that despite great differences and a superficial conflict, all liberal systems share the same fundamentals. Consider democracy as compared to a dictatorship. Even liberals will argue that democracy is incompatible with dictatorship. They like to argue that democracy is about freedom and dictatorship imposes tyranny on people. But it is not that simple. Democracy is akin to giving someone power of attorney. Once a person has voted, he is in the same position, vis a vis the state, as a person who is not permitted to vote. The state, regardless of how it was established, makes the law and requires it be obeyed. Representative government means the state stands in your place. Your vote is your X on a contract to abide by whatever the elected representative decrees is lawful. This might be a law setting the speed limit on roads or a law that requires all persons of a particular race to wear something indicating their membership in this race. The law is the law is the law. It has no other defining factor other than that the lawgiver has designated an opinion as something everyone must live by. However, humans are not physical constructs. If we were all, would be lost. Humans are a race, or more correctly, two races. It is true, one race is based on the flesh and is assumed to be physical. But if we make this assumption, we are forced to recognize only one single race of humans, called the human race, but specifically the race of creatures designated as Homo sapiens sapiens. Interestingly, the study of this creature is managed by means of many different disciplines, divided into two distinct methodologies. One group of studies is called the hard sciences because it utilizes quantitative standards. But the more relevant group are the humanities, also called the soft sciences, and these are more narrative than mathematical. Apologetic is generally understood to be part of the humanities and deals with the understanding of Scripture. But this is a very biased and limited view. If we ever wish to escape liberalism and its panoply of sciences, we need a new conception of what it means to be human and a new approach to how we study him. This is apologetic, a universal science that studies man as a unique race and culture as defined by God in Scripture. Anything other than apologetic is defined thus, and you are looking at reality through the lens of the Babylon reality, a reality known in modern days as liberalism. There are then two races and two realities studied in different ways from different perspectives. Secularists think reality is physically real. Therefore, mankind as H.S. sapiens is embedded in this reality and is considered to be a physical organism, one that can only be described in physical terms. If humans are physical, it makes sense to study us in a compartmentalized way. It would also make sense to deny the supernatural exists, that metaphysical statements have meaning, or that God exists. But we run into problems at every step when we begin this path. Information is not physical, and relative truth is not even what truth is. A lie contaminates truth absolutely. There is no truth when a portion of the truth is a lie. The naturalist conception of reality is no different from a liar attempting to gloss over the glaring discrepancies between what he is saying and what is observed. If reality is physical, then it is by definition all-encompassing and absolute. A physical reality cannot tolerate anything but things which are composed of matter, energy, space, and time. But as we have said, this excludes information, and it excludes information that is true. Technically, it must exclude anything not created by means of the transformation of matter, energy, space, and time. Everything must emerge as an effect of a previous cause. This is the chain that holds everything together in the physical universe. But to fully comprehend the liberal worldview, this idea of causal chains must be taken to its ultimate conclusion. If everything comes about by a series of cause and effect, then society has no alternative mechanism with which to create community than by the use of force. Ownership and law are founded on the ability of the state to enforce its decrees. Ownership gives the owner a position of authority over assets. Owned assets are either administrated directly by means of martial law or indirectly through a judicial process and a legally defined system of jurisprudence. But without the ability to resort to violence, when necessary, the law is not worth the paper on which it was written. One could go on and develop several arguments regarding the secular world's reliance on the dual doctrines of might makes right and the end justifies the means, but let it suffice to say, if reality is physical, then everything is physical. This includes the way society is organized. If one thing is caused, everything is caused. If what people do is caused, then technically we live under some form of tyranny. Technically, in a physical universe, there is no freedom from tyranny. If physical causes create physical effects, then the effect is totally dependent on the cause. This is tyranny. Every effect is totally caused. This is the dictionary definition of a tyranny. Even though we may say we live in a democracy, once a government is elected, it must resort to some degree of tyranny, depending on if we resist it or not. Even if the usage of raw physical power is moderated by the legal system it is under, the root of the legal system is the judicial system's ability to call on the raw power of the police and military. And so, if we are naturalists, if we are adherents and proponents of the liberal system, We advocate for tyranny, not because we necessarily support it but because we either impose our will on others or they impose their will on us. There is no other option. If the world is composed of physical matter, it is those who control the most physical matter, who rule and act as the causative source. Yet, even so, we know there is information. The claim the world is physical and only matter, energy, space and time exists, falls afoul of the reality of information. The claim that reality is physical is itself not physical. Statements are composed of information and information is independent of the physical medium used to transmit it. Without an intelligence to create and code a signal and one to decode it, information would not exist. But without a superintelligence that created the language, the coding could not occur. To teach a language is a far, far different thing from creating one. Science is a process of clarifying language. Science is a process of making language more precise. Knowledge itself is enshrined in language. We cannot know what a mile is without a way to accurately define the distance. We might call a disease the mumps, but without scientific research into the disease the word would be more subjective and narrative than objective and analytical. Science takes language that was subjective and narrative and by means of methodological research, turns it into precise data. Apologetics studies information as something that is God-breathed. We look at words as components of thought and as the building blocks of information. For example, people talk about religion and reality. These are words with conventional definitions. But does the usage of these words align with the information they contain? God embedded every word with a quantity of information. The starting point of all philosophy is the necessity of meaning. If meaning does not exist, nothing exists, not even nothing, because without meaning, not even nothing would have meaning. The purpose of every thinking person is to mine words for their meaning and only then seek to convey to others what one knows. This is why apologetic is a focused search for meaning as revealed by a careful study of the words we use.